Good afternoon, and welcome to another episode of Forever Young, the program that celebrates life for those of us who are over 40 or 50 or whatever. They say life begins at 40. So if you're 50, you're really maybe only 10. If you're 55, you're only maybe 25, 65. You do the math. But the reality is, age ain't nothing but a number. And that's what we celebrate life here at House of Hope. And of course, this program is a product of Hope TV, Forever Young. My name is David C. Linton, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to another episode of season 5 of Forever Young. And we are always delighted to talk about life for those of us who are over a certain age. Now, we say age is nothing but a number, but there's also an adage that says you're as young as you feel. So when we talk about feeling, we talk about health. And when we talk about health, we talk about, well, some people call it the common cold. Of course, we've all been dealing with COVID. October is Breast Cancer Awareness Month, which we talked about on our last show. But there are other things that people live with, chronic diseases. And so today we want to focus on lupus awareness. And so we've got two guests that are going to help us answer some of the mysteries and answer some of the questions around this disease. But of course, I cannot do this show without my two talented and beautiful co-hosts. And we call her beautiful because she is, and that's Miss Jean Hendricks. Welcome, Jean.
Thank you, David. As always, I'm excited to be a part of this program each week as we talk about subjects that's related to people who want to know more about themselves. Back to you, David.
And thank you, Jean. And then, of course, I call her the glue because she's sort of like our producer, she does all of the things of getting the guests and getting our questions, and sort of like our on-air producer as well as those who work behind the scenes. And that's, of course, Dr. Sharon Mitchell. Dr. Mitchell, welcome again.
Thank you, David. And it's always a pleasure to join you and Ms. Hendricks on this show. We always have a good time educating and informing. So glad to be here again.
Well, before we get to our two guests today, we always start the program off with a little nugget from Jean that kind of sets the tone for whatever we may be talking about. And I know for sure she will not disappoint us, and she's got a little nugget for us today. So let's hear Jean's nugget on Forever Young. Jean?
Thank you, David. And of course I do. And I found a letter that's addressed to Lupus. And it says, "Dear Lupus, you came uninvited like the thief you are. You invaded my body and lie silently, and you have no mercy. I am God's child, and you can never take from me what I refuse to give." Back to you, David.
All right. Well, let's get right into our program and introduce our two guests. First of all, as we said, lupus awareness is what we're talking about today. And we're honored to have with us J. Christopher Reed. He's a native of Atlanta. He was diagnosed with lupus in 1990 at the age of 16. Despite several brushes with death, he earned a bachelor's degree with honors from Georgia State University, has a law degree from Tulane University, which he attributes to God, the support of his family, and the support he received from the Lupus Foundation of America, the Georgia's chapter. He is a lawyer, writer, lobbyist, policy analyst, public speaker. He has served the public and private entities as a clerk to the Honorable Brenda Hill Cole State Court of Fulton County and clerk of court for the Magistrate Court of Rockdale County, and several law firms for a total of 17 years. His passion, however, is in public health policy. He owns Reed's Consulting, LLC, a consulting firm which specializes in policy development. And we want to welcome Chris to our show. Chris, welcome.
Thank you, David, for inviting me to this show, and thank you to Forever Young for certainly this invitation and recognizing that lupus is certainly a condition we need to really understand.
Okay. And our second guest is, well, she's one of our own. She's a phenomenal lady. I've gotten to know her. During COVID, when everything shut down, one thing that didn't shut down at the House of Hope Atlanta is our ministry. and our caring for our congregation, even those who are sick, shut in, or whatever. And I've had the opportunity to work with our next guest, Minister Pamela Hicks. She's a wife of 26 years. She describes herself as she's a master cosmetologist. She's a licensed instructor of the gospel. She has a BA degree in Christian theology from Life Christian University. Her title is Minister of Congregational Care. And that's how I got to know her, because she does such an excellent job. And when I actually saw her name on this program, I was amazed. You don't know what people, what they have, their journeys, and what they've been through. And so she's a 12-year survivor of, seventh lupus. Lupus, there's a technical name, and we'll get into that, but basically for layman terms of lupus. And so I am so delighted to have her on this program to share, because she's such a beautiful soul. Welcome, Minister Pam Hicks. How are you?
Thank you so much, David and Ms. Jean and Dr. Mitchell, for this opportunity to share. I am greatly and deeply humbled. Thank you so much.
Well, again, the table is set. We're talking about lupus, and we have included at House of Hope Atlanta, we've included lupus as a part of our awareness month. So Chris, can you tell us, the question is to both of you, but I'll start with Chris. I know ladies first, but I'm gonna go outside to our guests, okay? Because we're family, so we're always gonna do our guests. So we'll talk to Chris Reed first. But like I said, we've included lupus as a part of our awareness month. Now, can you tell us about how you became involved in lupus awareness yourself?
So like you indicated, I was diagnosed at the age of 16 in 1990. And really, it's becoming involved with the foundation itself and with lupus awareness really started that same year. Immediately after my diagnosis, my mom said, we're going to figure out what this condition is, what this disease is, and we're going to learn how to live with it. And so within pretty much, if I remember correctly, within just a few months, I was in a young adult support group here in the Atlanta area, really to learn about lupus. And since then, through my journey over the last 31 years with the condition, I've really decided that I really need to give back to the chapter that really helped me get through college, get through law school, and get through life. And so I love to do what I do with the foundation. I love to be a volunteer.
Well, before we go to the next question, we've talked about lupus. Explain, what is lupus for those who don't know? What is it?
So lupus is a chronic autoimmune disease that affects the immune system. And it basically, in layman's terms, I always like to tell people that individuals who have lupus are essentially allergic to themselves. Their own immune system attacks healthy tissue as if that tissue were foreign matter, like bacteria or infection. And so it typically attacks the skin. It can attack the skin. It often attacks organs for people who have systemic lupus. It can attack the joints, the muscles, and certainly the blood vessels. And so the more common organs that it does tend to attack are the heart, lungs, and kidneys. And it typically attacks through inflammation.
Yeah, thank you, because I'm sure so many people will hear this and we talk about it for people to really understand what it does.
What's up, y'all? It's your boy Jermaine Dolly, Mr. Hello Dolly himself, and guess what? Get tuned in to Tea and Worship with my homies, Mignon and Corey. Keep it out, y'all.
Hey y'all, it's Candy West, and you're watching Tea and Worship with Mignon and Corey.
It's your boy James Fortune, and you are watching my favorite news show, Tea and Worship, with my sis Mignon and Corey.
Hey, let's check out this park. Oh, wow, that's really cool. To find a great local park or forest near you, go to discovertheforest.org.
Gene, I know you had a question for our guest.
Yes, I do. I'm going to ask Chris this question also. Tell us about your volunteerism with the Lupus Foundation of America in the Georgia chapter, in case there are some of our listeners who may want to volunteer for that particular organization.
Yes. So I have been a volunteer pretty much since 2004 with the chapter, and the Georgia chapter provides services, support, education, resources, and it actually conducts research and development projects as well as it relates to lupus, as well as lupus patients and their caregivers. I've done a number of things. I am the advocacy chair for the chapter, which means essentially I work on all policy-related matters related to the chapter. I also am the support group leader for the Brotherhood of the Wolf, which is our support group specifically for men living with lupus. And in fact, it's the first support group for men living with lupus in the entire world. We started that about 11 years ago because we felt that there certainly was a need for men to really discuss their condition. And the reason why is that 10% of patients living with lupus are in fact men. So it's very rare in males. And so I thought it was very important that we really started a support group to really help people. I do work on a number of public health projects as well. I run a program specifically designed for school nurses. Because I was diagnosed at 16 and probably had lupus since I was 8, I have found, and as well as the colleagues that I work with on this project, that it's very important that we tackle lupus early on. Lupus, unfortunately, can cause someone to die. We do find that lupus does typically occur between the ages of 15 and 44. And so if we can certainly diagnose lupus at an early age, we believe that we can improve patient outcomes overall. And so involving nurses, school nurses, is very important to the journey of particularly of a student living with lupus.
One other question before it gets to Dr. Mitchell. If I wanted to be a volunteer, can anyone volunteer to help your agency, and if they don't have lupus or don't know anything about it? Is that possible?
Yes, of course. So to volunteer, we need volunteers year-round to work in the office. Of course, that's limited right now because of COVID. We typically have a walk every year, so we need volunteers for some of our education programs, some of our research programs. We actually have events around the state during normal times outside of the pandemic that we're dealing with right now. But to find out more information about the chapter, you can go to lupusga.org, and you can call us at 770-333-5930.
Okay, thank you.
So I'd like to pick up a little bit, Chris, regarding your journey. You talked about only 10% of cases for lupus are men. And in having a conversation with you, you talked about having been diagnosed in childhood, but there was some misdiagnosis first. Can you talk about how people typically get diagnosed and why we seem to not understand the disease in terms of making the diagnosis?
Sure. So I I'll tell you about my story a little bit first. As indicated, I lived with lupus since the age of 8. I lived with chronic headaches for most of that period of time that were diagnosed as migraines, but they really weren't migraine headaches. They did not have the classic symptoms of a migraine headache. I had them on a pretty regular basis, almost several times a week, which meant I missed a lot of school because they were certainly very difficult and very detrimental headaches. Also lived with muscle problems, some muscle spasms in my abdomen, and dealt with a number of other unusual illnesses. And really, for a lot of them, the doctors really couldn't understand what I was dealing with. And certainly it wasn't until probably the age of 15 that I really began, lupus really, basically what we call it flared up, which means it went into a really active state. Lupus is really difficult to diagnose it because every patient is different. My friend Pam, she may deal with certain symptoms as it relates to lupus, and mine may be completely different. Her journey may be different than mine. And so doctors typically really have to look at the patient as a whole. It on average takes 4 to 6 years for a patient to be diagnosed with lupus. And typically patients see about 6 doctors on average to really get a final diagnosis. And particularly for males, it can be even more difficult because it's so rare and doctors are not really looking for lupus. It's kind of the last thing that they look at. My case was very, very severe. I was in intensive care when I was finally diagnosed. And even so, we had an infectious disease doctor that came in and took over my case. He tested me for everything under the sun, some very embarrassing tests, some tests that really someone at the age of 15 wouldn't normally, or 16 wouldn't normally deal with. But finally he figured out that I had lupus. It's a disease that mimics other diseases. And so oftentimes as patients, we are really, we're dealing with different things. And so a typical diagnosis really requires that the doctor who's involved look at a patient's entire history, because you may see that they have one condition or symptom at one point, and that may not concurrently deal with another symptom that a patient has. And so it's a complex, very complex disease, one of the most complex conditions out there.
Well, thank you for sharing that, Chris. Let's flip that. You just talked about your journey and it's being rare with men. Now, Pam, I'm going to drop the minister today, okay? We're going to be Pam and David, okay? So Pam, tell us about your journey as an African-American woman, specifically, because we know all diseases affect everybody, but when it comes to ethnic groups, there's a different journey even, so tell us, can you share something about your journey and for our guests?
Sure. Well, I have a brother, an older brother, that was diagnosed with lupus when he was 15. Then I have an older sister that had a stroke when she was in her 40s, and that stroke was the result of lupus. So when I found out that I had lupus, I became violently ill in 2009. And doctors, kind of like what Chris said, they ran all kind of tests, and it left him baffled. And so back then the swine flu was out, and so they just gave me some Tamiflu, because I was so severe. I had headaches, fevers, a fever that wouldn't go away. I used to suffer from blood clots and didn't understand why my blood would clot. And but once I got over that violent sickness in 2009, I had these bumps that came up on my arm. The bumps didn't itch, but they just was raised up on my arms and my hands. And I ended up going to a dermatologist, and the dermatologist did a biopsy on the bump, and that's how I found out I had lupus. And And so by my brother and my older sister both having lupus, but back then it wasn't a lot of information about lupus. And so once the doctors told me that I had lupus, and they referred me over to a rheumatologist that ran the proper test to confirm what the dermatologist found. So then that's when I decided to join the Lupus of Georgia organization because I wanted to have a greater understanding so that for me, so that I could understand what was going on with the lupus and learning about the flares and how to go about treating it. And then I could take that information that I learned back to my siblings and share with them what I learned from joining the lupus organization and then joining the LACES chapter in DeKalb County that I ended up joining, and so that was my beginning, and that's been some of my journey of learning about the illness as far as lupus and um, learning what to do and what not to do when we go through what we call a flare. I do not like the flare at all, and so so I make sure that I do take care of myself and do what's necessary so that when those flares come, I don't like them, and because they can affect you in a capacity of different ways. You may not be able to get up out the bed. You may not be able to walk. One day you may feel fine, and then the next day, or even in the same day, I might not even be able to open my hand and stretch my hand out. So I went from being diagnosed with carpal tunnel, and that wasn't it. I was going through what they call a flare, and so I just needed to have a greater understanding of how to maintain a normal lifestyle and deal with the lupus at the same time.
Looking at those areas of how you became who you became, and then looking at what were all the influxes that interfered with all of the stuff. We don't like to do that. That's too much work, Selena. Sometimes you have to take it in small pieces, in small fragments. You can't just run through it and say, okay, let's merrily do this work. It'll be fun. No, it's not fun work. It's painful. But we have to do it to get through it.
You said something in your answer, and thank you for sharing that. You talked about some of the effects, but you said something that was really key. You talked about your siblings, Now, so the genetic, I'm wondering if is there's a genetic component to this disease, and are you the oldest? Where are you in the food chain as it relates to those your siblings? Are you the youngest, the oldest, in terms of the diagnosis? So first, there is a genetic component to it.
Yes,
Okay.
I am the youngest.
Okay.
Um, like I said, I am the youngest. And my sister Shirley, she's actually the oldest, but my brother Robert, he's the second oldest. And he was the one that was diagnosed first. And then, like I said, my sister suffered a stroke, and we found out that the lupus was the underlying cause of my sister's stroke. And so now we just found out in April that I have a 33-year-old nephew that has been diagnosed with lupus. And it took some years, like Chris said, it took some years before the doctors could actually give him the diagnosis that he had lupus. And because of what I had been going through or what I went through, I kept telling my sister to have them to check him for lupus, and so he had to get with the right doctors, and now we know, and so now because of the information that I have received, I'm able to help my nephew with some of the challenges. And I was going to introduce him to Chris so that Chris' organization could help my nephew with, being a young African American male, and to help him learn how to navigate through. Because, like Chris said,
Good.
mine may affect me one way, but it may affect my nephew in a whole different way. So, but yes, I found out from joining the LACES group chapter that it is genetic.
Thank you. I think that's really some good information. Now, Gene, I know you had a
So,
question for one of our guests.
yes, I wanted to direct this one to Pam also. And I think she really answered the question I had. But in addition to that, I wanted to find out whether or not this diet and exercise has anything to do with helping a person who has lupus. Is that a plus for them if they had special foods that they had to eat or special vitamins they should take?
Um, I don't have a special food. I know I started eating food according to my blood type, and I think that kind of helped me. And it's funny because when I started learning about different foods that I should or shouldn't eat because of my blood type, it was some of the food some of the food that I should not eat. I didn't like it anyway, and I couldn't figure out why I didn't like the food. when, when I was like, oh, so that's why I didn't like that because it didn't fit my blood type.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
the exercise, even though I do not like exercising, I really don't, but it will help my joints. Uh, keeping the weight down because when I first went through that really bad what they call a flare up and didn't know what it was. I mean, I was down to skin and bones. I just I dropped the weight, so I mean I looked really sick, and then they'll put you on the prednisone, and the prednisone will blow you back up. And so I think the exercise is vital to keeping your joints from a lot of the inflammation and keeping you from just being so stiff. So I think exercise and diet is very, very important. But you have to understand the things that you should eat and the things that you shouldn't eat because there are some things that you can eat and it will aggravate certain joints or it can give you a setback or a flare up, and some of that is even pertaining to some medication as well, I believe. I took an antibiotic. The doctor didn't know, and it put me down where I couldn't even get out the bed. So just, get a greater understanding, have good doctors that um, will really work with you and help you understand how to navigate and walk through this journey of understanding this disease.
Thank you.
So I have a question for Chris. Pam is sharing with us her journey as a woman and certainly her family history. Chris, can you share with us what other groups are affected in terms of race or gender? What the statistics say as relates to lupus?
Sure. And if you don't mind, Dr. Mitchell, I want to just clarify something that Pam said. So certainly about 1/3 of people living with lupus do have a genetic component. So we kind of see that 1/3 of patients really may have a relative that lives with lupus. But the other 2/3 may not even have a genetic connection. I don't have a genetic connection to lupus. We believe my grandfather may have had lupus. He had pericarditis, which is a condition that I have very commonly, in which the immune system attacks the heart. But my grandfather rarely went to the hospital. And when he did, the one time he did go to the hospital, unfortunately he passed away. But for example, in the 1990s, oftentimes women who had breast cancer, or not breast cancer, I apologize, women who had breast implants and the implants leaked ended up developing lupus. The Department of Defense is right now studying the incidence of lupus in individuals who worked in active duty in the military. So those people who were in Iraq or Afghanistan, some particularly women came back with lupus. There's also been found that a lot of people with lupus end up developing it around pregnancy. But to get to your question, lupus is 2 to 3 times more likely in African and people of African descent, Asian descent, and Latino descent. It is definitely more severe in those of African descent and Latino descent. Not sure if it's because of a component within the body, or if it deals with our social disparities or health disparities, in which we're essentially those two groups tend to have less access to healthcare. Lupus is, as I said before, 10% of patients are male, so 90% of patients are female. Lupus tends to be more severe in males, particularly at onset, and it's possibly because men don't go to the doctor. It's very possible that it takes longer for men to be diagnosed. And in fact, when I was diagnosed, within that, I believe it was that same year that I was diagnosed, I went to a lupus event here in Atlanta. There was a rheumatologist who was speaking. He was a keynote speaker, and he said he didn't think men had lupus at all.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
And I remember sitting next to my mom and my dad. I'm like, okay, why are we here? What's going on? And and I said, yeah. And that was some of the research back then, is that we had something else. Men had something else, that we couldn't have lupus. No way. And still to this day, lupus is considered a woman's disease.
Wow.
And it's not uncommon for me or any of my guys in my group to be in a room and be the only male in the room living with lupus. Not uncommon.
Wow. You know what? Unfortunately, we're going to have to put a pin right there. But the conversation is so invigorating and so enlightening. I'm going to, if I can ask Chris and Pam to stay over so we can do a part 2. We have a time slot. We got to fit the 30 minutes, so we got to get the information in. But we know that there's a wealth more of information. You guys are such great guests. So if we can say, we want to just hang on, and we're going to do a part 2 for our viewing audience. We thank you for checking in every week for Forever Young. As you see, since we've started season 5, we've really been trying to delve into things that are important about your health, especially as we're living with COVID and all this thing, because the whole world's been thinking about COVID, but we forgot about
Yes.
everything else we were dealing with.
Right.
And so we're
Yes.
trying to recalibrate ourselves. And let's look at the other thing instead of looking at the whole. So we're going to ask Chris Reed and Pam Hicks to come back to us. I'd like to thank Gene Hendricks and Dr. Sharon Mitchell for always sharing this platform with us. We'd like to thank our executive producer, Dr. E. Dewey Smith, for the vision for Hope TV, Benton Atlanton and the media ministry, the media team for creating this whole forum, and of course, our producer, Tammy Tappan, for always making us look good and sound good. And so on behalf of that whole team, until the next time, remember, age ain't nothing but a number, and you are forever young. I'm David C. Linton, and we'll see you again next week. Bye now.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.